crazy busy, but business has been really good.
Ha! Great. Speaking of which, have you heard about Tur?
No, what's up?
Massive tech company. They got hacked and their financial documents got leaked in the middle of a giant merger. It's all over the news.
That's insane.
Yeah, absolute mess.
Makes me glad we're a small company. We are not big enough to be a target. Let me call you back. What's going on? The store's supposed to be open by now.
System's down. I can't log in and I can't reach the payment account.
Oh no. No.
What's going on?
Welcome to the Cybersecurity series. I'm so glad you joined us today. I just sent my wife a message suggesting that she start shopping at that store we saw in the opening video segment. Oh, they couldn't process your credit card again? Oh well, I guess we'll just have to look at the bright side and be thankful that we saved some money today. On a more serious note, by the time we finish today's episode, I hope none of you ever says, I'm glad our business is too small to be victimized by a hack. Today we'll be talking about ransomware attacks, definitely one of the most common and costly dangers that businesses of all sizes face today. Each of our three guests is an expert in their field. They'll be sharing their unique perspectives on a problem that each of them routinely sees in their day-to-day jobs. We'll learn how ransomware attacks happen, who is doing them, and what we can do about them. We'll get some sage advice on how we can prepare, prevent, and respond to ransomware attacks. And hear some great career advice before we wrap up with a live Q&A session. So please, feel free to enter your questions in the chat as we go along during today's episode. With that, I'm delighted to introduce today's guests, Special Agent Colin Scott, James Fair, and Romaine Marshall. James Fair is the Senior Vice President of Technical Operations at Executech, a very successful managed service provider that serves customers from their offices throughout Utah, California, Arizona, Colorado, Washington, and Oregon. Colin Scott is a special agent with the FBI working on a multi-agency cyber task force out of the FBI's Salt Lake City field office. And Romaine Marshall is an attorney at Polsinelli, where he specializes in cybersecurity law. Gentlemen, welcome, and thanks for joining me today. Especially for those of you who aren't in Utah like we are today. It's a snowy day, so thanks for making your way through the busy roads today.
Snowmobile all the way.
Yeah. I wondered if anybody brought a one-horse open sleigh, but I haven't looked in the parking lot to see. So hopefully your horses are happy while you're
They're
in
good,
here.
yeah.
On this show, we frequently talk about the wide variety of jobs that are available in the cybersecurity profession. And today, each of you, we'll talk about your jobs in a minute, each of you highlights some of that variety in these roles. In our first segment, we'd like to talk about what you do in your cool jobs and what your companies do, or in Colin's case, what his agency does. And James, let's start with you by doing that.
Sure.
You've been in the IT industry for 35 years.
I have.
Which means I think that you started when you were 10 years old.
7 maybe, but yeah,
Okay,
sure.
sounds good. You've spent the last 10 years at Executech. Can you start by telling us a little bit about Executech?
Yeah, so Executech is an IT service provider, and we provide cloud, cybersecurity, and IT support. And we do it in a people-first fashion, so you get a personable, down-to-earth kind of a person. We really believe that IT is based on business, not the other way around.
That sounds great. And you're all across the western U.S. Can you give us an idea of how many clients you might have spread across all these states?
Yeah, we're up to almost 900 clients that pay us on a monthly fee every month.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
Great business.
lots of folks.
Yeah. And you are a senior vice president.
I am.
What does that mean? Do you still get your hands into your client systems, or do you leave all that to somebody else?
No, I still have a client. So yeah, I want to make sure that I maintain my skills as I'm leading technician. So I want to make sure at least I know what I'm talking about. So I do still have a client of my own, actually, a small one, but I do still maintain a client. So yeah, I get my hands dirty. And I've got 35 years of experience. I'm gonna help the people who came on board recently with their challenges as well.
Sounds like they're lucky to have you.
Thank you, sir.
And I think you do a podcast. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, we do. The podcast is called Between the Bytes. It's weekly IT, cybersecurity, and business leadership news.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Okay, Romain, your turn. You're an attorney with Polsinelli. Can you tell us a little bit about your firm?
Yeah, so I work for Polsinelli. It's a national law firm that has about 1,000 lawyers spread across 23 different offices. Polsinelli just opened a Salt Lake City office, so it's the 23rd office. And I've opened that office with about 4 or 5 other attorneys. We're here in the Cottonwood area. Polsinelli is known for its healthcare, real estate, and financial services practices. But it also services numerous other corporate types of legal needs, and of course, cybersecurity.
I was just going to mention you have over 20 years in the law profession, and you specialize in cybersecurity law. I wonder, Romain, does that make you popular at family holiday gatherings, or are people more interested in what's for dessert?
Yeah, somewhat popular. Everyone has a complaint about a letter they've received from one of their favorite restaurants or hotels, or a tech startup that says, "We regret to inform you that your information may have been compromised." So most people have received those types of letters that are circulated by law as required. People will ask me very, very technical questions that I don't get. I need to remind people I'm just a lawyer. and so my involvement in cybersecurity is the intersection between what is technical and what is legal. And
that
so,
sounds great.
Yeah, it's been good.
Super cool. And we're excited to hear a little bit more about it in today's show.
Thank you.
And finally, Colin, I don't know that anybody needs an explanation about what the FBI does. So, you've been a special agent with the FBI for 5 years, working in the Salt Lake City field office. And you've worked in the IT field prior to coming to the FBI.
That's correct.
You work on, in FBI parlance, on a cybersecurity squad. So I don't want you to reveal any, well, I do want you to reveal some national secrets, but you probably shouldn't. So without revealing any national secrets, can you give us an idea of what you and your squad mates do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. At a high level, like, my responsibilities are actually pretty simple. I'm tasked with collecting evidence in instances where we believe there was a violation of federal law. So in terms of the cyber world, that's kind of split into 2 areas: the national security side, as you alluded to, and then the criminal. And so what we'll be talking about today, is the criminal side, which ransomware is a big part of. A few of the other things that are pretty popular now are business email compromise. We'll look at denial of service attacks. We'll look at account takeovers, SIM swapping, and then we even have a few things that are kind of on the periphery that we will work, as they don't fit neatly into other categories like cyber stalking. And we've also worked ATM skimming, and as well as ATM jackpotting.
All sounds fascinating. Well, all 3 of you are super fascinating. I was just thinking, maybe we'll have Colin back for another episode and just sit and listen to some stories. So thanks for sharing.
Welcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear all 3 of your perspectives. As you know, we're going to talk a lot about ransomware today. So I'd like to start by watching today's learning segment, which will kind of give us a foundational footing that then we'll build on. So let's roll the learning segment.
When we talk about ransomware, it's helpful to think of a 3-act play. In this case, rather than a musical or a comedy, the ransomware play is definitely a tragedy. In Act 1, our hero is merely reading along through his email messages when he comes upon a random message with a link to a cute kitty video. Our hero loves cats, so of course he clicks on the link and enjoys the video. What he doesn't realize is that when he clicked on the link for the video, he initiated a string of malicious code that ran in the background, creating unauthorized access to his system. As the curtain closes on Act 1, our hero has no idea that anything is wrong with his network. Act 2 begins like any other day, with our hero logging into his network. Rather than his usual login screen, he is surprised to discover a new screen with an ominous message. All of his files have been encrypted, and he has been locked out of his network. As the curtain rises on Act 3, our hero has just read the demand for payment of $5 million in cryptocurrency. He doesn't have the money to pay the ransom, and he has heard that even when people pay the ransom, they sometimes don't get all their data back. At this point, the playwriters wrote storylines for 2 alternate endings. One ends in true tragedy. Our hero finds a way to borrow the money for the ransom payment and obtains a key that only partially unlocks his data. In the end, the whole event proves to be catastrophic. Without access to his data, his business fails, and he ends up bankrupt because he is unable to pay back the loan he acquired for the ransom. The other ending goes down a much happier path. Because our hero recently watched a cybersecurity series episode about ransomware, he kept offline backups of his entire system and had practiced restoring his system from those backups. Because of that, instead of paying the ransom, he calmly restored his system, located and removed the malicious artifacts before they could once again encrypt his data, and vowed never to click on a cute kitty video ever again. As a result, his business was saved, and he went on to be named Entrepreneur of the Year.
That was an outstanding learning segment. And with that as our backdrop, that's, it was a 3-act play, backdrop. Come on, you got to give me something today. I'd like to follow the typical before, during, and after timeline of ransomware attacks. Let's start with the before, and I think that has 2 perspectives. One is the future victim perspective, the unknowing future victim perspective, and the other one is that dark place where these bad guys who do ransomware attacks are plotting for their next attack. So let's start with the future victim perspective, and James, I think we'd like to start with you.
Sure.
Even before the victim clicks on that cute kitty video that was in the learning segment, that ultimately grants access to their system, or a phishing video, or phishing email, what advice do you give your clients about what they should be doing to avoid becoming victims of a phishing attack?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, don't click, right? I think we established that one pretty clearly. Even if you get like, hey, my plane is delayed, or my FedEx package, rather than clicking on the email, the link in the email, I recommend people just go to the search engine and type in delta.com or fedex.com. Don't click on the link in the email. It's just not trustworthy these days. So I'd start there. Then we want to layer on security. Security is all about layers for us because it's possible for an attacker to get through a layer or 2. So we want to put on as many as possible to try to prevent it from happening. Probably the next easiest one for anyone to do is multi-factor authentication, or 2-factor authentication is called. From personal experience, I woke up one morning and on my phone was just this wall of attempts to get into my email account. That email account was also my online trading account. So they would have access to all my money. But fortunately, I had multi-factor authentication turned on, so it didn't go through, and I changed the password, et cetera. So I can't stress enough how much we should have multi-factor on. It's an easy win, and it moves the needle a whole bunch. So start there, especially any kind of banking, the email that may, because password resets typically go to email, you want to make sure your email is protected as well. And then we want to layer on some things like, let's make sure we have backups, proper backups. And it was mentioned in the video, right? Cloud-based offsite backups are super important. Now you want to be careful there because you don't want to back up the data once it's been infected, but backups are definitely critical. You can survive fire, flood, theft, ransomware, just about anything as long as you got proper backups. Some other layers we want to put on, we want to have, so I appreciate the mindset of let's block the attackers from coming at us, right? But we also want to have the mindset of what do we do if it happens, or when it happens rather, right? How do we react when it happens? Especially for an organization, they must be prepared to deal with it when it happens, just because the odds are not in our favor at this point. So create some kind of an incident response plan that you know who's going to do what in the event of a situation like that, and practice it, right? Turn off the server, see what happens, shut off the internet, turn off the power, try different things, and make sure everyone's just super clear on how to do it, because you can really decrease the amount of damage that can happen if you can respond quickly to an event like that.
Yeah.
So certainly start there.
Those are great tips. And it might sound like a lot, but taking each one individually, really, it's not that hard. Even if you're a small business, it's not that hard. You got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere, and you can build it on, right? We also want to have antivirus, of course. I think that goes without saying. Everyone should be running antivirus. The critical system should be running anti-ransomware. There are some anti-ransomware products out there these days. And you don't have to do it all at once. A lot of small businesses will look at that and go, there's just no way. So we want to create a roadmap to get there so that eventually down the road you're in a better space.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Romain, it was a great list. Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, on the incident, I really liked how James mentioned with an incident response plan, practicing it. So one of the areas that I get most involved in as a lawyer is helping an organization have the right governance structures in place. And to me, those are three things: an incident response plan, conducting a risk assessment to know where you might have vulnerabilities, and then having a written information security program that fleshes out how your security is constructed based on what you've learned through a risk assessment, and then what you need to include in an incident response plan. And the key part of an incident response plan is who are going to be the coordinators, like who are going to be the team members that are going to be making sure when the response is needed to it, that everyone is on the same page. And that can only be done when an organization is committed to being ready. And so the mindset I've been encouraging clients to have is assume you're going to be breached, or assume it's actually happening or has happened. And that's different from just being ready for if and when it happens. Just assume it's going to happen if it's not happened already. And so that changes the governance structures I've talked about a little bit into being just a little bit more important and involving key stakeholders in those processes.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great points. James, one more pre-attack question for you.
Bring it.
Are there any indicators or warning signs that people might be looking for that help them think or recognize that an attack is imminent?
Attackers are very careful to make sure they're not creating that kind of footprint where you can prepare for it. I would say there's a couple, like nowadays we see when an email breach happens, when your email is taken over, a lot of times they go in and create a rule, and the rule says if any email comes in, delete it automatically. Because that way they can send an email to all of your contacts, and when people start replying back with, is this real? Is this legit? Should I click on this? Is this really a good cat video? They can reply back and say yes, but you never see the email. So it's tough to say, hey, if you don't get email, freak out. But by the same token, be aware. If you usually get 300 pieces of email and by noon you have nothing, there could very well be a challenge like that. So look out for that. And again, this is a tough one to see, but if your computer slows to a crawl suddenly, okay, it could be something going on with your computer, but it could also be processes running in the back that are encrypting your files.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
those are,
Great. All right, Colin. I don't know why we have to go to the dark place, and that's your topic, but that's where we're at. What are the bad guys doing to get ready for a ransomware attack?
Sure, and there's kind of a wide variety of strategies that the bad guys are going to use in terms of like complexity. It can be as simple as they're going to scan the open internet for like open RDP connections, and then maybe just shotgun out their ransomware at all of those targets and just hope they hit something that's worthwhile. And then if you shift to like the other end of the spectrum of very complex adversaries, they're going to stake out, have a specific target, hopefully gain access via whatever's the easiest way for them. And then they may spend a period of weeks or even months navigating around your network, looking for where certain files are located before they're actually going to deploy.
Yeah. So potentially just target of opportunity, RDP or phishing emails, everything to a strategically targeted attack.
Absolutely.
It's the whole gamut. I read recently that starting in about 2019, so roughly 3 years ago-ish, instead of ransomware just being grab your files, request a ransom, be happy if you get some money, the bad guys started not only locking up all of your files, but stealing your data, and then either just dumping it online or holding it for ransom, an additional payment. Hey, we'll unlock your system for this much. We'll give you your data back for an extra payment, or potentially selling it on the dark web to the highest bidder. Have you seen anything like this sort of transform through your investigations over time?
Absolutely. We've seen examples of every one of those strategies, including taking a victim's data and holding on to it, going through that data, and let's say that it's a law firm with a list of clients and they have sensitive data there. They're going to contact those clients and let them know that, hey, your law firm knows that they've been exposed and they're not telling you and they're refusing to pay. So it has shifted, and now the majority of those that are a little bit more towards the complex end of the spectrum are going to try to exfiltrate data before they drop ransomware.
I think that's a great example, too, because I'm thinking of course, it wouldn't happen in your firm, nor your office, Romaine, but Romaine's client list is a whole nother opportunity to send targeted phishing emails, because now you understand the context of where you got that information, and a fairly sophisticated adversary is probably going to take advantage of that and just keep leveraging one to the next to the next.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
We've definitely seen that in ransomware attacks.
Yeah. So since of the three of you, the managed service provider, the FBI, and the cyber law attorney, when somebody's victimized with a ransomware attack, who gets the call first, do you think?
We hope.
It's going to be me, I suspect. I mean, they may call anybody, but I think it's usually me.
If they're your client. Do you ever get calls from people, Colin, who say,
Certainly.
all right, oh, and maybe it's a future client.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, we get plenty of calls saying, I don't know what to do. You know, it's like we saw in the learning video, right? My files are gone. I got this ransom note. What should I do?
Yeah. Romaine, do you ever get calls out of the blue?
I do. Typically, it's because people have referred them to me. But organizations, especially people with certain positions, they're concerned immediately with what legal obligations they might have based on what the ransomware may have encrypted or what information may have been exfiltrated. And so most organizations are familiar with regulated data, the types of data that come with strings or legal strings or regulatory requirements on their protection. And so it's usually when I will get the call first because they're worried about that right away. But often it's second.
Yeah.
It's someone like James will refer them to me for the legal side of things, or their insurer or the insurance broker will say, ooh.
Oh, we didn't talk about that in the preparation phase, but cyber insurance, that could be part of your incident response plan, right?
Right. Cyber insurance is a great way to get ready, because an insurer will not give you insurance unless you have some structures in place to be able to respond adequately.
Yeah.
And usually the insurers are the places that will start mandating things like an incident response plan. And that's how I will get my name included on that incident response plan, or how how James or how Colin also, there will be somewhere in there that says file a report.
Yeah, I'm going to ask about that one in just a minute. So do we call the cops or not on this thing? I'm going to ask you that in a minute. So moving from the pre-phase to the now attack phase, Colin, we're going to start with you on this one. Who are these people that are carrying out these ransomware attacks?
The vast majority are going to be in Russia and Eastern Europe, but you'll see pockets of them everywhere, mostly outside of the U.S., North Korea, China, Iran, Africa. But Russia and Eastern Europe are where the majority originate from.
Yeah. And are they criminal groups? Are they government groups? Or is it maybe kind of a fuzzy line in there about what's what and who's who?
Yeah, without going into too much detail, the fuzzy line is probably a pretty good answer. But a lot of times they are similar to like an organized crime group. You have folks that have specific responsibilities where these set of people are going to be responsible for targeting. This set of people would be maybe responsible for gaining network access. There are going to be people that are going to be the negotiators, and those that maybe actually collect the funds at the end and launder it and spread it out.
So it's a business. This is not the stereotypical hacker living in his mom's basement, wearing a hood over his head all the time. There's big money associated with this illicit business. And so accordingly, I think, as you said, like organized crime, it is an organized business.
Absolutely, and it has become incredibly profitable. Just when I started in 2018, the volume of ransomware that you'd see wouldn't be that high, and the payments requested, which James can definitely confirm this, would maybe be in the hundreds of dollars or thousands on the high end, and now we're regularly seeing payments in the millions.
That's crazy. There are probably hundreds of these attacks every day. How does the FBI prioritize these investigations?
So the FBI does things, at least initially, geographically. So it is, we don't want anyone to ever hesitate to call your local field office and reach out. And if you ask for an agent on the cyber squad, you may come directly to me. But again, I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Oh, I was just wondering how the FBI prioritizes the investigations.
Yep, perfect. So a victim will call in, and what we're looking for immediately is if we can identify the variant of the ransomware. And we understand that the victims have other priorities. I mean, they may be looking at having to shut down their business. So we try to, as gently as possible, get as much info that we can right out of the gate. And if we can identify that ransomware variant, the odds are likely that there is an investigation opened into that already. And now it may not be with our local field office, but we will act as your point of contact between us and whomever is actually running that. And there's a good chance that we can provide some information that may be helpful going forward after your attack.
And I think you brought up a good point that I want to ask about, and that's, hey, folks are interested on recovering and getting their business back online. And sometimes there's this perception that, oh, if the FBI gets involved, the next thing that happens is these black Suburbans show up and a bunch of people in very professional dress like you're wearing jump out, and the next thing they know, their servers and their desktop hardware is all gone for months. They're in the newspaper, they're on tonight's news. Is that realistic?
Absolutely not. I mean, that's the last thing that we want to happen, because we understand how devastating some of these attacks can be. So we're going to be there to help if we can and collect what information we can without being too much of a burden to the victim. And if they're willing to share any of these items, we will happily take them. But we understand that they have priorities as well.
And your forensics folks can image whatever evidence may be there electronically, usually right on site.
Absolutely.
Right?
And and once things have already happened, the clock is not necessarily ticking for us to do exactly those kinds of things like you're mentioning.
One more question for you. I know I'm going to get to you guys, don't worry. I know I'm peppering you with this, but it's around why is the ransom demand always in Bitcoin or some cryptocurrency? I mean, I have a teenage son, Sam. I don't think he has hacked my computers yet, but he's always hitting me up for money, and it's just Venmo. Why don't the bad guys ask for a payment by Venmo?
Well, the easiest explanation is they're trying to disguise where the money is going to go, and maybe sometimes where it comes from. Sending a wire transfer gives us a very easy path to follow to potentially identify who's on the other end and actually collecting that money. But that's not to say we are crippled by people using cryptocurrency. There are ways to follow that, but that's their ultimate goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I suspect. I don't want you to give away any more. Again, I do, but we're not going to pressure you. But again, cryptocurrency, that's pretty interesting when it's in the system. But at some point, when somebody wants to cash out, there's usually a real person and either a real account or some transaction that is, and if they're not going to cash out, there's no reason to be doing this illicit business
It's a blockchain.
anyway.
It's all a ledger. It's all.
Yeah.
You can see the movement of it.
Good points.
Yeah.
All right, Colin, last question for you. Inevitably, somebody has suffered from a ransomware attack. Heaven forbid they didn't have a backup. They're going to ask you the question, hey man, should we just pay the ransom? What do you say?
The official answer is no, because if no one paid a ransom, there would be no ransomware. There'd be no purpose for it. But we also understand that for some people that's not realistic. Their businesses may have to close their doors if they are unwilling to negotiate with them. So again, our official policy is no, but we do understand that folks have to do what they have to do.
Yeah, great. And that's a tough business decision.
Yeah.
All right, James.
Yeah.
In spite of all your great work and the layers of protection, somebody clicked on the kitty video. One of your clients calls and says, James, I got a real problem. We're the victim of a ransomware attack.
Yeah.
What comes next?
We began to roll out an incident response team. We've got incident response teams. We've got a playbook that we go by. So we'll get people on site. We'll start. The idea is to hopefully narrow it down to which machine it is, and then take that thing off the network, begin to explore whether or not it is data that's critical. Do they have backups? Do they have recent backups? How critical is that data? So we begin to explore that, and then we probably will involve these folks. I'm going to reach out to Colin. I'm going to encourage the client to call a lawyer, to call an attorney, just because they're an important facet of the whole thing.
Yeah. Does the size of the client business have any factor on whether they're more or less likely to be victimized by this?
No, quite. Unfortunately, unlike that woman said.
I mean, it was in the video.
Yeah, she said it, so it must be real, right? But no. Nowadays it's an organization, and it's a multifaceted organization that are doing these. They have ransomware as a service, and there are attackers who are doing a spray attack, as he mentioned, right? So they're just going out there and they're hitting anybody and everybody. Not to the extent I'm sure my co-host here has had, but I have had the displeasure of looking through the dark web to see a ransomware data that's for sale out there, and it was everybody, right? It was a school, it was a gas station, it was a huge organization, a corporation, so it's everybody. And unfortunately, we find that the small and medium businesses are typically hit harder or more frequently because they don't have the controls in place. They don't have the security layers in place. Yeah. So no, it's anybody and everybody. No one is safe.
Okay. We probably just don't hear about it as often unless it's a Colonial Pipeline or something.
Right, it doesn't make the news, yeah.
We don't hear about them. Okay. Yeah. 2 advice questions from you. The first is,
sure.
I suspect frequently your clients are going to say, should we report this to law enforcement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only way we make this better is if we start being a bit more open and transparent and visible with each other. As long as it's being hidden and they're still making money, then we can't help each other. We don't know how to support each other in this. I think the only way we I don't know if solve it's the right word, but move toward a solution is to start banding together. So our answer is absolutely involve the FBI.
If I picked up right on Colin's answer, hundreds of these are going on every day, thousands probably worldwide. And it sounds like the FBI and even some of the industry folks, based on even the splash screen that you see or whatever it is, you can start identifying the crew or the group who's behind it. And I think the only way you get there is through people reporting it, because otherwise everyone seems, oh my gosh, this is a unique thing, we've never seen this before. But when we start aggregating that data, that's how they start, I guess, identifying trends and attributes that help you say, oh, this is these people.
Yeah, we've worked together. I'd say here's the file extensions, here's the ransomware note. They may come back and say, we see it's this kind of variant. That gives us a clue on how to deal with it too.
Yeah. All right, and the second advice question for you is, hey James, should we pay the ransom? Should we just forget all this IT nonsense and pay the ransom and get our data back?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the government stance, but our default answer is no, we don't want you to pay. We don't want the bad guys to make more money. The reason, as he said, that this is going on is because they're making money at doing this. So we don't want folks to pay. But there are absolutely circumstances where I have to have a tough conversation to say, do you have backups? And they say no. And the next question is, well, how badly do you want your files back, right? How critical is your data? Yeah. And it's a tough conversation, and unfortunately, we do end up down the path of having to pay at times.
And I'm guessing there's not a money-back guarantee that the decryption key is going to necessarily work.
There's not, but they want to keep a reputation, right? Because if their reputation became that files don't get decrypted when we pay, people would stop paying them. So they have this important reputation that they're trying to hold. And I want to say, in my experience, certainly the vast majority of the files in those ugly instances we've had to do this have come back, I have to admit. So,
all right.
That's not to say it's going to be the future or that it won't happen, but thus far, at least in my experience, so far so good. So.
All right. Romain, you're a patient guy.
Thank you. It's great responses.
Sometimes, like you said, you get the call after the immediacy, but not too far after, because the very next thought is, man, do we have to tell somebody about this? Similar to what I asked James, do you find your clients, is there a particular industry that's victimized more than some other industry?
I haven't seen a focus on one particular industry. It's across the board. Unfortunately, more recently, small governments, municipalities are being targeted. Agribusinesses are being targeted. That's been my experience in the last 3 to 6 months. And it's small, medium-sized businesses who are less equipped or less ready for these types of attacks.
So very similar to James's experience,
Unfortunately.
Same as yours.
Yes, yeah.
And invariably, I mean, this is one of the main reasons they call you is for some of this advice.
Right.
So I'm going to go down the list of the questions. First is the money question. All right, Romain, should we pay or not?
Yeah.
What do you tell them?
Well, another reason I will get a call is because clients have anticipated that this might happen. And so they've either gone and gotten the cyber risk insurance policy that they can afford and pay for. They've got backups in place so that if they need to make a decision about payment, they can say no because we've got that data that's been encrypted anyway, or they can answer the question about what's been exfiltrated, whether that's going to come back and hurt them later also. It's such a fact-intensive question. One of the other things that organizations have to consider when they do decide to pay is what other legal obligations do I have? And so there's the Office for Foreign Assets and Control that has recently come out with advisories that say, if you're going to make a payment, you better make sure you're not making a payment to anyone on a list of entities that they say are sanctioned.
So the industry, I think, it's generally the OFAC list is
the
what we hear.
The OFAC list, yes.
It's the naughty list.
It's a naughty list. It's a list of suspected entities that have ties to terrorism, drug cartels, other illegal conduct. And so it's another thing that an organization has to consider. And okay, if we do make this payment, is OFAC going to be upset about us because we didn't fully determine that the people we're making the payment to is not on that list? And that's not always possible.
So I paid this money to get my business back,
right.
And now I'm potentially in hot water because that money goes to or went to somebody on the naughty list.
Exactly.
And now potentially my own government's going to come and
potentially prosecute me, or
remedies,
send me a letter saying, please explain why you made that payment. But the other thing organizations have to consider is, what if we don't make this payment? And so the threat actors know a little bit about that calculus because they know what kind of business you are, they know what kind of regulated data you collect, and they know how important it is to you. So they'll often set a rate or ask for a payment that's affordable, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Or I had an instance where, in response to threat actors, I said my client can't afford much. And I got one simple response, and that was last year's revenues. And so they knew exactly.
So this was one of the more
Yeah.
strategic
They had pulled
targets.
it from a spreadsheet and said, as if to say, no, you can do better than that. And last year's revenues had been 150 million.
Wow.
So they know what's affordable, or they will know what's in the insurance policy.
Yeah.
And then often if you've gathered the attributes, like you mentioned about the type of gang that's involved, if you involve the right technical consultant, they will know their limits too. They will know that, yeah, these people usually will take 50,000. They're asking for $500,000, but after a few days they'll take 50,000. So let's get the money ready.
So it really does behoove anybody who's victimized by this to be talking to people just like each of the three of you, because of the immense amount of exposure that you have into these groups, to give them the right advice, because the wrong decision really could mean the difference between surviving or not surviving as a business.
Yeah, and we're part of an ecosystem that helps each other. I don't have all the answers when these things happen.
Yeah.
I gotta talk to Colin or James.
So we did the pre-phase, the sort of during phase. Afterward, this is all done. We'll start with you, Romain, since you patiently waited during the last phase. Is it done? Do we all just walk away, or is there something we learn or should be doing after an attack like this?
Well, on the legal side, it's okay. Do we, as the organization that just experienced this, need to notify anyone? Do we have a contract that says within a certain time period, if there's an incident that may have or actually did expose any of our data, you have to tell us? Or are they in a jurisdiction, in an industry that requires notification? If not, if the threat actors didn't really access data that might have triggered those obligations, then I encourage clients to do a post-mortem and say, okay, for next time, how can we be better prepared?
Yeah.
How did this happen in the first place?
Yeah, great. James, same question for you. The attack's over.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Executech brought them back online. What are you and your clients doing?
Typically, we're preparing for some backlash afterward. Whether they paid, or in particular whether they didn't pay, there is typically a lot of follow-up attacks. We'll see phishing attacks all of a sudden because they probably got a hold of an email list. We'll see the texting, fake texting, right, for gift cards. It's the CEO texting you with I need gift cards right now, I'm on a plane, hurry up, this kind of thing. We've seen an instance where the phone number was changed. Excuse me, the phone number didn't change, but the forwarding of the phone number changed. So when you called the main number, it actually forwarded to a recording location and then sent the phone call on. So they were recording every single phone call that came through after that. So we want to make sure we're going through and cleaning up, looking for any existing foothold the attackers may have as a big part of it. And then, yeah, we're going to do a post-mortem. We're absolutely going to look at it. Where did we go wrong? Where did we go right? What are we going to do differently? And how do we prevent this from being a thing in the future?
I think in the textbook incident response, you're in the lessons learned phase, and that rolls right back into the preparation phase.
And then, affecting the incident response. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, Colin, does the FBI ever get its man on these things?
We do. We do sometimes. Yeah, I mean, ideally, right after this happens, we want to get the folks responsible. We want them to answer for what they've done. The challenging part, as I've already mentioned, is most of these subjects reside in places that are not friendly with the United States. So no matter what, we're going to try to take that path and do whatever we can to find and indict and hopefully arrest those folks. If we can't do that, we'll try to make it as difficult as we can for them to travel and leave where they are safe. And recently there's been a shift because the term ecosystem has been mentioned at least once. There's ways that we can make things more difficult for these actors. We can make it more difficult for them to set up their infrastructure. We can make it more difficult for them to get their funds back. So we do have options outside of physically getting someone, but that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, excellent. This has been fascinating, and I think we could go for hours, but we need to keep it going. Before we move into our career advice segment, we do a little thing we call Sage Tips, and it's play on words. Here at WGU, our mascot is Sage the Night Owl. And so these Sage Tips, this would be when the mascot should come out in the owl uniform and
You're not wearing
costume. No, I'm not wearing it today. So here's how we're going to do it today. Rapid fire Sage Tips. Here are the rules. I'm going to ask each of you just to give one tip, your top answer, for the prevention, the response, and the aftermath phases. It's all the stuff we just talked about. You only get to choose one. It's rapid fire. The stakes are high. And if somebody else gives your answer, you have to give a different answer. No repeats, all right? So we'll start with James first, and then we'll cycle through everybody. So let's start with prevention. James, top tip.
Multi-factor authentication, no doubt.
Colin.
Know who you need to contact before something happens.
Romaine.
Data minimization. Don't collect stuff as an organization you don't need.
Oh, that's a great tip that hasn't even come out today. Way to go. Bonus point on that one. Colin, response phase, top tip, go.
Call the FBI or report this to ic3.gov, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, and do not be afraid to reach out. We're happy to talk to you.
Excellent. Romaine, response phase.
Yeah, document what happened. In your incident response plan, there should be a way for you to classify whether the incident is low, medium, or high. Just document that you examined it properly. If there was nothing to do, good. You can at least say you looked at it.
All right. James, response phase.
Teach your employees what to do in the event of an attack. Make sure everyone knows how to respond so we can narrow that window down between the time someone detects something is happening and someone like us can do something about it.
Excellent. Last one. Romaine, you're first. After it happens, what do we do?
Yeah, record what happened and why it happened, and then start addressing those vulnerabilities that led to it in the first place.
Great. James?
Get a security assessment. Bring an expert in, have them do a risk analysis and see what else.
Hashtag call Executech.
Maybe, yeah, sure.
Colin?
Hopefully, you'll be willing to share all of this data with us after the fact.
Excellent. Excellent Sage tips. Thanks, gents. All right. Because we're running short on time, and I want to get to whatever questions are on the device here, our career advice segment, and sort of similar to what we just did, the same question for each one of you. Each of you has a super cool job that does super cool stuff that contributes to the cybersecurity profession. And so imagine that I just met you and I said, wow, that's a super cool job. I would love to get into that someday. What advice do you have for me, briefly? Let's start, Romaine, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would advise someone to focus on taking classes, lessons, trainings relating to communication. So much of cybersecurity is about communicating what to be aware of, what is a risk, what is a vulnerability, what isn't. And in the future, I anticipate there being a lot of what are called false positives. And the danger in false positives is it kind of numbs people into thinking this is another non-event. And eventually it's going to be something that's serious. And so the key is just communicating the differences between what's just an event and then what's a full-blown incident.
That's a great perspective. Thanks for that. Colin?
I'm going to cheat and offer two that
Okay,
are sort of closely
that's all right.
related, especially in terms of having cyber background, is one, don't be afraid basically to apply for the Bureau. I wasn't former law enforcement. I wasn't former military. I'm not an attorney. I have my background's in information technology. I worked at a software company. So consider what can you bring to the FBI that they may not already have. And then to go along with that, if you are going to choose sort of a more technical background, it's non-negotiable and critical that you have to be able to deal with people.
Kind of goes back to what Romaine was saying.
Right, because if these folks that we work with, victims or other industry experts, if they don't like you and you can't communicate with them, we cannot get any work done.
Does the FBI have room for someone that tells bad jokes? Is there a need in the FBI? I think there is, because I know a guy who used to serve that role in the FBI.
I know that same guy, and he was able to slide through somehow.
So somebody out there, there's a need in the FBI to fill a role for someone that tells bad jokes, because that guy's not there anymore. Thank you, Colin. James, career advice. I want to do what you do. How do I get there?
I could give you the, take the IT path, but I am a self-taught person. So I'm going to give a non-traditional answer. I'm going to say, believe in yourself. You can only go as far as you believe yourself to be capable of going. So believe in yourself, go for it.
That's great advice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, outstanding. And I really love the three perspectives that are unique, and yet they're kind of converging in some ways too. And again, I can't stress enough the variety of roles in cybersecurity. You three are just some of them. Speaking of roles in cybersecurity, and I've got some of the questions up here. James, we're going to start with you, because this one might earn somebody some money starting very soon.
Oh.
Does Executech have openings for entry-level IT staff?
Entry level is a little tough. I'll take someone who's educated, and we certainly have plenty of WGU students that are on board. So go get your cyber degree or your IT degree, and let's talk.
The preceding was a non-paid advertisement for great degrees at WGU.
It's true. We got a lot of students that work for us.
Great. Here's one probably for you, Romain. I see a lot of personal health information at risk. So,
Yeah.
have you seen trends in industry targets or other types of data that people may not be thinking about?
Yes. So proprietary information relating to business processes and pricing information, things relating to deals becoming more attractive to try and steal. It's called business or cyber espionage. That is increasing, I think. So just information like that I wouldn't have thought maybe 2 or 3 years ago cyber actors would even care about.
Trade secrets.
Trade secrets, exactly.
This Colonel's secret recipe.
There is a market for that type of information on the dark web, especially we've faced a lot of threats from China in that regard, probably for the last 20, 30 years. And we're just realizing the full extent of that.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that answer. Great answer. Colin, one just came in. If the hackers are in a place like Russia, why do they bother using Bitcoin?
Well, I would say the banking system is not exactly stable in Russia. And also, there may be some other folks who want a piece of that payment if you decide to take a more official route with your funds.
And I'm supposing I can't go to Walmart and do a Western Union transfer to Red Square.
That's correct.
I don't know how it works. I haven't tried.
Have you done it?
I'll stick with you, Colin, because I know this is where, if you're not watching this live, this is during December, so a lot of holiday scams going on. And there's a question that's relevant to that. What can individuals do to help protect their information that they provide to companies? We'll start with you, Colin, and then maybe jump to you, James.
Even though it isn't directly related to that, no matter how much training we give people, just don't click on links, anything that you're sent. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. And maybe just go around that to see if you can directly talk to the person who you think is reaching out to you.
My wife just told me, I think 2 nights ago, hey, do we have a maintenance contract with the Geek Squad? Because it says here that we just paid $300 and something to renew it. And my first question was, well, after saying, don't touch it, what's the email address that's coming from? And of course, it had nothing to do with Geek Squad or Best Buy, who are fine companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind that even when you download an app on your phone, you are agreeing to share all of your data with that. So almost like Romain was saying earlier, kind of accept that maybe your information has already been shared. Yeah. It's sort of already happened. So be careful with what you choose to share.
Anything to add to that, James?
Yeah, just two things. So one is, yeah, anybody that you're sending your data to, you're trusting that they're going to hold on to it, and they have done all the security measures. They've put all the security measures in place. So be very selective about who you do business with, because I certainly want to encourage small and medium businesses, but you want to make sure that they've got proper security and that they are securing your information, in a way that we hope that we would do for them if it were reversed. And then one thing we haven't mentioned yet is do a phishing campaign. Meaning if you're in an organization, have someone who's trained and who you know and you're paying to do it, actually try to get your client, your staff to click on things, to enter their passwords and logins. Because I'd much rather have someone simulate that than have an attacker come in and be successful. And it happens every time. We do a phishing campaign and we'll see a big spike in people reaching out saying, is this a real email? Right? Then it kind of tapers over time. So you got to do them periodically. But do a simulated phishing campaign so you can stop those kitty video clickers.
I have an idea for that too, James, and that is training people with phishing simulations. If a company has the time and the desire to do it, I think there's great value in asking the people who we're trying to train to design their own phishing emails. Because I think it would help the learning process and the thinking process of, man, what would I fall for?
If I were an attacker, yeah.
And anyway,
I like that.
let me know how it goes.
I'm going to use that. Thank
I'd
you.
be happy to be a
that.
judge to give a prize to the best one.
We'll send the next one to you.
Yeah. A couple of questions in here from somebody asking about what kind of courses or preparations who somebody in high school might look at if they're interested in cybersecurity. Now, you said you're self-taught in a lot of the things that you're doing.
True.
Any ideas on kind of how somebody might just get started into some of this? They have a curiosity about it.
Yeah, cybersecurity has a fundamentals in IT. So learn IT, learn system administration, TCP/IP, networking. That's all going to be very fundamental and necessary as you move into more complex cybersecurity classes.
Awesome. There's a question in here about is it a common need to hold a DoD security clearance, or I would expand that to say a U.S. government security clearance while working in cybersecurity? And I know Colin's very familiar with the clearance process. We get this question a lot from our students here at WGU who are looking at expanding into certain opportunities. And I would say from the perspective that we see, and then if any of you has a different perspective, please share it, but it depends on who you're going to work for. The government itself, the FBI, the Department of Defense, several other agencies with 3 letters, all require a clearance, and they all generally have their own clearance background investigation process that they put their people through. The other side of that is a large number of companies that do work for government contracts that also require some kinds of clearances. And in that case, people who come with an existing clearance don't have to get in line to wait to their number and then the background investigation and stuff. But those who don't have it, our experience is that those companies that require that also have a process for going through the background process and getting those clearances. Anything different that you guys have seen in that one?
I would say it's not prevalent. It's pretty uncommon for us. Now, maybe it's just not the industry we're targeting, but I don't see a whole lot of requests for that. I certainly do see them, but it's not a common request. So I wouldn't worry that it's necessary unless you're targeting a certain organization you want to work for.
That's a great point. Not all jobs require a clearance.
Right.
Great. Do you have a clearance?
No, and I don't think it's necessary,
Yeah.
except for that defense
Colin does.
sector.
Correct. Yeah,
James,
if you want to work
maybe.
for the FBI.
I don't
No.
know if you're a superhero.
No,
and
I
you
tried
haven't-
once, and it was a tough process. So I'm like,
Yeah.
never mind.
All right.
And expensive too. So
Yeah.
And that's a good example of, hey, let the hiring company
yeah,
pay
decide.
for it. So, all right. There was one other question, by the way, about international students looking to break into the cybersecurity profession. And I would just say, I think everything we've been talking about, as soon as we connect to the internet, we are instantly in an international context. And so it's not a US-based problem. It's not a US-based opportunity to try and solve the problem. It's clearly all of the opportunities that exist here exist internationally too.
Agreed.
Fair enough?
Yeah.
Yep.
Romaine, James, Colin, outstanding. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your insights with us today. I'd love to keep the conversation going. over pizza, I think, here in a few minutes.
Nice.
So
Let's
you're
do it.
invited to
Keep
stick
pouring on.
around with it. To each of you who has joined us, I'm not sure where I'm looking. To each of you, thank you. To each of you who has joined us, thank you for spending the time, for thinking about some of these things. And I hope what you've heard today doesn't scare you into doing something. I hope it motivates you into taking some proactive steps, perhaps seeking some advice from these very professionals or someone just like them, and then getting yourself prepared and knowing what to do when the inevitable happens. Many of you have asked, hey, my friend wanted to see this. Where can I find these episodes after the fact? I think we have a QR code coming up on the screen. That leads to a YouTube channel that has past episodes, has some of our funny promo videos that I think they're funny. Some of our promo videos that we do before these sessions, and anybody can access them at any time. We'll be back in a couple of months with another episode of the cybersecurity series. Stay tuned either through subscribing to the YouTube channel or following us or looking for more details on LinkedIn. And we'll be excited to be back with some more great guests, another great topic in cybersecurity, and hopefully to see all of you join us in a future episode. Until then, be safe, plan for the inevitable, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.